Ketchikan,
Kotzebue,
Dillingham,
Sitka,
KUAC,
Fairbanks,
Fort Yukon,
Wrangell,
Barrow, Unalaska Dutch Harbor,
From the frozen North Slope to soggy Southeast, from the Kuskokwim Delta to the upper Yukon River, from the far reaches of the Aleutian Chain to the heart of the interior, this is AK. This week on AK, 100 years after the Wright brothers' first flight, a quick snapshot of Alaska aviation history. We'll hear from a wannabe pilot and a few scared passengers. Also, feeding the interior with the help of a singer-songwriter, and blowing your own glass Christmas balls. First, this news.
AK is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, whose mission is to provide programs and services which inform, enlighten, and enrich the public. By the Alaska Humanities Forum, using the humanities to enrich the civic, intellectual, and cultural life of all Alaskans. And by Alaska Railroad Corporation. Weekend flag stop service is now available between Anchorage and Fairbanks. Information is available for off-season packages and seasonal trains at alaskarailroad.com.
Welcome to AK. I'm Elizabeth Arnold, filling in for Michelle Wozniak. On December 17, 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright made their historic first flights at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The longest of the four lasted 59 seconds and traveled 300 feet. The centennial anniversary of that day will be celebrated this week with numerous events around the country, including a party at the FAA headquarters here in Anchorage, even though it's only the 90th anniversary of flight in Alaska. The first flight here was in July 1913, when Captain James and Lily Martin shipped their plane north for several exhibition flights in Fairbanks. Aviation really took off after World War I in the 1920s. That's when the first commercial air transport companies were established. Lots of new routes were pioneered, and Alaskans began to ask for and build airfields. One of the early airfields was Anchorage's Merrill Field, named for pilot Russell Merrill. Merrill helped pilot the first flight across the Gulf of Alaska, pioneered the air route from Seward to Anchorage, and found a new pass through the Alaska Range to reach the Kuskokwim Delta. In September 1929, Russ Merrill disappeared on a flight to Bethel. Merrill Field in Anchorage was established in 1930 and dedicated to Russ Merrill in 1932. Today, Merrill Field is one of the busiest general aviation airports in the country. In 2000, the airport saw almost 200,000 flight operations. It's also one of the first landmarks many newcomers see when driving into Anchorage. It clearly indicates the importance of aviation in Alaska and tempts some of those newcomers to try their own hand at flying. At least that's what happened to Linda Billington.
I could fly just fine. I just couldn't land. That pretty much sums up my short, inglorious career as an Alaskan student pilot. Rick, my instructor, was the soul of patience and encouragement. With his lanky frame folded into the right-hand seat of the Cessna 152, he gently guided me through the complexities of aviation. Then, one day, he directed me to land on the shorter of two runways at Merrill Field. Merrill is a busy general aviation airport smack on the fringe of downtown Anchorage, Alaska. All kinds of aircraft weighing 12,500 pounds or less come in there, and they come in from several directions. My preference, because it was both long and wide, was runway 624. Runway 1533 was 1,350 feet shorter, and the approach to 1533 came in so low over car traffic that I just knew I'd take the top off that red SUV cruising down 15th Avenue. As usual, Rick talked me down calmly. Okay, level those wings. Good. Remember, keep it straight with the rudder, not the control wheel. You're a little high. Ease off on the throttle a bit. Okay, now back to idle. Right. Now, level off. We swooped across the end of the runway, and the plane started to sink, and I was trying to recall just when I should bring the nose up, and suddenly Rick's calm instructions were growing staccato. Nose up. Now, nose up, more, more, more! And we hit, and bounced again, and I figured, hey, we're down, and dropped the nose wheel just as we bounced a third time. F***, Rick said, the first and only explicit Anglo-Saxonism I'd ever heard from his mouth. Later, he told me that I could have demolished the nose wheel. But once we'd braked and moved on to the taxiway and I'd caught my breath, all he said was, "Well, we'd better get the mechanic to check out the landing gear." We did, and the mechanic did, and we went up again. And the next time we came down okay, but I knew then that landing was never going to be my forte. Oh, I tried. I bought books on good landings. I watched videotapes of good landings. I tried to get into the landing zone, if there is such a place. No luck. A landing at Merrill was one of the first things I saw my first day in Anchorage. Fueled by an overdose of Jack London and Robert Service and Rex Beach, in 1969 I took a reporting job at the Anchorage Daily News, loaded my earthly possessions and a friend into a 4-year-old Plymouth Barracuda, and headed up the Alcan. 11 days later, we entered Anchorage. Cruising into town, I was startled by a tiny single-engine plane that roared over my car low enough to sear the gold paint off the chassis. Then I realized that the plane was aiming for an airfield that paralleled the highway just a few feet away. I had discovered Merrill Field. For nearly 40 years, Merrill had served as a major link to the Alaska beyond the skimpy road system. The airplane, I quickly discovered, was the pickup truck of these northern skies, the battered, everyday workhorse decked in worn paint, its dings patched with ingenuity and duct tape. Never before had I lived in a place where small planes were taken so much for granted, where flight was not just a reality but a daily necessity. I just had to try this flying business. Signing up with a local flight school, I managed a couple of lessons in a little Cessna 150. Swiftly, I was slapped in the face by 3 sobering facts. A, I couldn't afford it. B, I was acrophobic. And C, I was scared to death that I could die up there, or, worse, kill somebody else. C was the chief problem. I didn't touch an airplane's controls again for nearly 30 years.
Linda Billington's full story, My One-Night Stand with the Air, is in the short story collection Alaska Women Write, published by Epicenter Press. Now back to the history lesson. Arctic and polar explorers, miners, and mountain climbers all started to see the benefits of flight in the 20s and 30s as one particular flying maneuver became more common, glacier landing. Bob Reeve made a name for himself landing on glaciers in the Chugach Mountains to deliver supplies to miners. Joe Crewdson made the first known landing on Denali's Muldrow Glacier in 1932. Some 20 years later, pilot Don Sheldon established the Talkeetna Air Service and met Bradford Washburn, who needed a pilot to help his surveying team with their work mapping the area around McKinley, as well as the mountain itself. Sheldon and Washburn worked together for 15 years, and Sheldon became known for his mountain flying and work on climbing rescues. The same keen observation skills he used landing on glaciers helped him in another line of work, flying animal surveys. Wildlife biologist Gordon Haber spent many hours in small planes with Sheldon.
He was a character, The first time I ever flew with him, it was a Kvapil day, just beautiful weather, and I was standing down at the Denali airstrip there and waiting for him. And God, he went on an hour and a half, and he finally showed up, late, and I was just seething, I guess I didn't understand. I was green and young, that bush pilots fly on their own schedule. But anyhow, before I could ever get a word out, to chastise him for being so late, he had that natural disarming sort of way about him. He got out of the plane, the first thing he said, "Wow, it's just hell of a headwind."
In 1967, Haber made an audio recording on one of his flights with Sheldon.
Well, hello there. We're out amongst the wolves again today. Last trip we located 9 in the area of Stony Creek. Unusual situation today where apparently the wolves have killed a caribou, and they're contested by a big brown bear.
Haber says Sheldon was the main pilot for the Park Service from 1966 to 1974 and flew countless surveys.
Okay, it's 12:10, 10 minutes after noon, and we're now making our approach to land at the strip. We're just about ready to touch down here. A few feet off the ground, just taxiing in now.
He flew float planes as well as skis and wheels, ferried journalists around, and helped cinematographers shoot footage of wolves chasing caribou. Don Sheldon died of cancer in 1974.
There's touchdown right there, almost 12:15.
Time for a break from aviation and time for My 2 Cents, a weekly opportunity for Alaskans to tell us how they really feel. This week, Susie Siluk examines the way the Anchorage Police Department investigates crimes.
The Anchorage Police Department recently disclosed that it does not investigate a quarter of all sexual assaults, simply because they lack the cash. Police Chief Walter Monaghan says prevention is going to have to do for now. Teach women about high-risk behavior. His great example is the Meet and Greet program, where every AFN convention, people go down and, in a sense, babysit grown women from predators. What a splendid long-term solution. I've said for years that the city does not investigate certain sexual assaults. I wonder what criteria were used to determine whose rapes get attention and whose don't. And has anyone broken that down by race? Native women make up nearly half of the rapes. Do we also make up the majority of that quarter that doesn't get investigated? We should be insisting on investigating the possibility of racial profiling in this area for the benefit of all victims who go through this hideous ordeal. Does the chief decide who is acting responsibly and who is being risky in deciding which rape to pursue? Tell me, was Sonia Ivanov engaging in high-risk behavior when she got in that cop car in Nome? I mean, the chief said that, sadly, some victims remember nothing due to alcohol. Does anyone ever get cited for overserving these victims? And there are always clues. After all, murder victims aren't around to tell you who killed them, so you go by other clues. That's why it's called an investigation. Just how many trained investigators do we have, anyway? Monaghan's favorite excuse for blaming victims is alcohol. What a convenient excuse for a police department that has done such a poor job investigating violent crimes against Alaskan Native women. After all, there is that prevalent stereotype out there that everyone concurs with, Chief? He should instead be publicly condemning the men who cannot control themselves and find ways to get the message across to them that their behavior will no longer be tolerated here. The Anchorage organization dedicated to helping rape victims isn't doing such a great job either. Standing Together Against Rape, or STAR, gets their funding from the same public safety money that funds the police department. The same year I complained to them about the police department's failure to investigate a sexual assault, they awarded the police for their fine job investigating rapes. Clearly, there is a conflict of interest here. A 1994 report on violence against Alaskan Native women in Anchorage recommended a victim assistance center with an exclusively Alaskan Native staff. It said, quote, "Native women told us that having their own people to talk to is very important. Advocates would provide intervention at the scene of the crime in coordination with officers, provide both medical and legal advocacy, and provide shelter and counseling to victims and children. 10 years after that report, we still don't have a center. Given the shameful rate of violence here against Indigenous women, it is more than justified, and finding funding should be a priority. The recent paintball attack against a young Native woman is only more evidence of the racism many of us have felt for years. We experience, see, and share our stories and know all too well it's here. What will these paintballers be doing tomorrow if this community doesn't condemn that and all violence towards women? I'm Susie Siluk, and that's the way I see it."
If you have a different opinion on this topic or another issue you'd like to address, or if you want to defend the Anchorage Police Department, email us at ak@aprn.org or call 1-800-752-APRN. After the break, phasing out one of Alaska's Great Plains. Welcome back to AK. For many an injured pilot, a lost hunter, or a stranded boater, that sound means rescue. Since the 1960s, when the Civil Air Patrol took over several dozen military surplus de Havilland beavers, the stocky, barrel-nosed workhorse of the North has been flown on countless search and rescue missions. But those days are waning, and Sutton reports the CAP, faced with an ever-tightening budget, is preparing to phase out a piece of history.
Fasten the seat belt. We got all the switches off, the avionics off, all the lights are off.
Winds calm, temperature 26, ceiling 3,000 overcast. For Jeff DeFriest and Dave Fredericks, it's a fine day for a training flight.
Fair prop!
I've been enamored by beavers since 1971 when I first flew in one.
DeFriest was a boy then, on a hunting trip in Canada with his dad.
We flew into a lake and hauled in 4 hunters and a bunch of gear, and there's things strapped all over that plane. I don't think it would have met FAA specifications. That's the way that things were done in Canada back then anyway.
Now the kid is a squadron commander for the Civil Air Patrol, and he's learning to fly the Beaver himself. He's got 20 hours under his belt, and he's about to add another.
All righty, we ready?
I think we're ready.
All right.
Nearly half a century after their peak production, the de Havilland Beaver is still a bush pilot's dream, a powerhouse on floats, skis, or wheels. Pilots rhapsodize over its big fuel tanks, enough for 6 to 9 hours of cruising, and they love the way this broad-winged bird settles neatly into a short field landing. It's a good ship, they say, docile and well-mannered.
It's a nice aircraft to fly.
For a pilot like Steve Stuck, the ability to fly low and slow over rugged terrain in ragged conditions makes the Beaver a great search plane.
The Beaver itself made history in the North Country. They made a lot of saves and rescues, and to everybody's knowledge, the Beaver is the old workhorse of the North.
A CAP member since 1951 and a past squadron commander, Stuck made a lot of those saves in southeast Alaska. Search and rescue has always been the main mission of this volunteer service organization, an auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force.
It's a big, heavy aircraft, and made for that type of weather, I think, where the smaller airplane, you just get beat to death up there.
But CAP pilot Mark Stella says the organization does fewer rescues today. While the CAP has 32 planes stationed round the state, and they still fly hundreds of hours in searches, a military or Coast Guard chopper usually heads to the scene when the lost are found.
Those particular missions have diminished recently because helicopters have come into play, and they're more readily available and common, especially with the military.
At the same time the mission is changing, finances have become less certain. Last year, Governor Murkowski zeroed out state funding for the Civil Air Patrol. The $500,000 that pays for CAP's operations and maintenance was eventually reinstated, but the organization was worried. Now, the Beaver is a big bird and takes a lot of fuel. Many parts are hard to come by, and inspections are costly. So the word went out. The Alaska CAP would phase out its 9 remaining Beavers over the next few years. But Stella says finding a suitable replacement to be paid for by the U.S. Air Force is no easy task. Their most promising prospect so far is Australia's new bush plane, the GA-8.
2 problems arise. One is the performance of the airplane and the endurance in flight time. Endurance is a big factor when you're flying up in the interior, and the other thing, of course, is that we would have to build new hangars to accommodate the other airplane because it won't fit in the hangars that the state of Alaska has built for us in different locations.
Many CAP pilots don't really like the idea, even though it means trading in a 50-year-old aircraft for something brand new. That's because the Beaver has earned their trust and respect. Stella remembers getting a call in the early 1960s. A plane was down west of Fairbanks. Fierce winds had whipped up a gritty dust storm, grounding most aircraft, but his crew, flying a Beaver, located the pilot, wind-beaten and marooned, on a river sandbar next to his overturned plane.
and we came by there just as it got too dark to really see anything, but we could line up, and the snow and sand was reflecting off our light and off the side of his airplane. So each time we actually saw his airplane in the landing light, I'd give the kicker the signal to kick, and we put out 4 cases of rations and 2 bedrolls.
The Beaver has proved itself time and time again, as a new generation of pilots is learning. But its day is coming to a close, at least with the CAP, and it will be sorely missed.
Juneau Towers, Cap Flight 5027, request an outer point departure.
Cap Flight 5027, outer point departure is approved. You have a nice flight.
5027, thank you.
In Juneau, I'm Ann Sutton.
There are hundreds of books by and about Alaska bush pilots, humorous, serious, coffee table picture books, and even one dedicated to the wives of bush pilots. It turns out there's also a song or two. This one is sung by Jimmy Simpson.
Home and home to home in Kvapil.Pkg, where the pilots are many, but the good ones are few. They fly all kinds of weather, never worry about tomorrow. Home and home to home in Kvapil.Pkg. When Art Fields flies his Super Cub, he's like an eagle in the sky. He's got so many hours, he couldn't count them if he tried. I don't know where they'll send him when it comes his time to die. He's too ornery for heaven, and he's too tough to fry. There's old Barefoot Staley with a gleam in his eye. He hangs around Guyana, and boy, can that guy fly. The girls all used to know when old Staley hit town. They called him a ladies' man till one tied him down. Now he's homing home to home and got to view where the pilots are many, but the good ones are few. They fly all kinds of weather, never worry about...
It started with a legend that tells of a stranger who arrives in a community unwilling to share an ounce of food. That is, until the stranger convinces everyone that he can make a hot, nutritious soup with simply a stone and some hot water. As their curiosity grows greater, he slowly entices them to contribute ingredient by ingredient until there's enough food to go around. For one Fairbanks organization, the story of Stone Soup served as a focal point as it transformed its community kitchen and renovated its administrative offices. Fairbanks resident Rachel Kvapil recently visited the newly named Stone Soup Community Center to discuss the reasons for the recent changes, what it means, and how one international musician contributed to its cause.
It's a half-furnished building filled with a lot of heart and ambitious goals for eliminating hunger in the interior, a job that for years has been handled by its parent organization, Breadline Incorporated. Board member Douglas Leggett explains that the Stone Soup Community Center is but another chapter in that mission.
My wife and I were sitting on a cold day dreaming about ways that our neighbors and us could eat together in ways that seemed a little less a stigma attached to it. And we thought, well, the breadline has a proud and long history, but what could we do to make it more than just the bread line where people, the concept of people standing in line and getting food, but rather everyone in the community, including those who come to the bread line, feel like they're participating in something that builds dignity as well as hot food. So
part of that vision came earlier in the year when organizers renamed the downtown Breadline Soup Kitchen the Stone Soup Cafe. Yet it proved to be only the beginning. Leggett says Breadline Inc. has since undergone a major philosophical change in its approach to solving hunger. This included shutting down the soup kitchen's old source of revenue, the clothesline thrift store, and renovating the space into an administrative building that also houses other activists willing to help in creative fundraising.
We've got some organizations here that are committed to the kind of social activism that also encourages everyone from children on up to begin to ask those hard questions. And that's not always possible when you have an organization that, if it's so concerned about fundraising strictly, that it can't ask more difficult questions.
The Stone Soup Community Center is already seeing the benefits of its combined efforts. Just last Saturday, the Fairbanks Coalition for Peace and Justice arranged for a benefit concert in Fairbanks with international musician and activist Stephen Smith. Known as the modern-day Woody Guthrie, Smith sings about political topics, war, the environment, and hunger. For him, holding a benefit concert for the Stone Soup Community Center made sense.
If I sit down at the table with you and there's 2 loaves of bread, and we sit down, or even if there's 1 loaf of bread, and there's no other food to be had, are we going to share that? Or am I going to have 3/4 of it, or almost all of it, and give you none? That's the bottom line. And I don't care if that's within the town of Fairbanks, or if it's in America, or if it's across the world and across borders. That's not a hard concept to imagine.
Well, but don't you know the truth? Said the man at his desk. Yeah, you're lying, call it truth. Said the child, and he stood, and he stood, and he stood, and 'twere well that he stood.
Now that you've seen the community center that you're working on raising funds at, what is kind of your impression?
I love it. It's beautiful. I'm seeing it, and it's being also renovated into a really nice space, which is such a great thing, because people that need and want community centers, they should be things that really make people feel empowered as well, right? And so to see a place that when you walk in, you immediately feel good and you want to be here. When I walked in this place, it felt like a place where I'd want to come to hang out and make art or do things with people.
The money from the 300 tickets sold at the benefit concert goes to flooring the new center. All told, the event brought in approximately $1,500. Next, Leggett says the plan is to build a kid-sized kitchen for the ongoing children's program. So far, he says that they have been lucky, as most of the funding has been given by sources outside their regular donations, sources such as Stephen Smith and other various organizations.
Where are you going, said the man at his desk. I'm going to the new world, said the child.
The renovation has been possible because of grants outside of our normal money that donors make. So donor money that's going to help support the cafe stays there for the most part.
Leggett says 24% of the Fairbanks North Star borough falls below the poverty line. With the numbers rising throughout Alaska, he feels the Stone Soup Community Center will do its part in alleviating some of the current needs while searching for more long-term solutions. For AK, I'm Rachel Kvapil in Fairbanks.
Well, you must be scared to die, said the man at his desk. No, I'm prepared, and you're scared, said the child. And he stood, and he stood, and he stood, for well that he stood. I'm prepared, and you're scared, said the child, and he stood.
Smith also held a benefit concert in Homer for local youth organizations and in Anchorage for local peace organizations. After Alaska, Smith will wrap up a year-long tour and return home to New York City. Now a look at a few events around the state. The Nutcracker Ballet continues this weekend in Homer. Coming up next week, the Kachemak Center hosts a craft show and flea market. On December 21st, the Kodiak Baptist Mission hosts a Currier and Ives old-fashioned Christmas celebration with cookies, cider, and good cheer. There'll be sleigh rides if there's snow. If not, they'll go to Plan B, hay rides. The Christmas Literary takes place in Petersburg on the 21st. Community members come together to read poems or stories they've written or someone else's work. The event is broadcast on the local public radio station, KFSK. Looking ahead to just after Christmas, the dog mushing season gets underway in Kotzebue, with the first race scheduled for December 28th. Juneau native John Unzicker has been playing the guitar for 15 years. He used to tour South Central Alaska with the group Ripe on the Vine and currently plays with Top Secret. Unzicker is married with 3 young sons, and in May he'll finish his senior year at the University of Alaska Anchorage. AK's Ellen Lockyer caught up with him at his senior recital at UAA.
I started out playing a lot of different styles, and my father-in-law is a classical guitarist that inspired me, and just listening to more music as I got older and just wanting to pursue different styles. I moved up here to go to school, but they offered classical guitar instruction, so I started taking it more serious.
How long have you been playing guitar?
About 15 years.
Oh, wow. So did you start out classical, or did you start out like rock and roll or folky?
I started out as a rock and roll guitar player. I still play rock, but as your tastes mature and you get older, and you just start pursuing different styles of music and more challenging repertoire.
I was watching your hands. It's quite phenomenal how quickly you move. How many hours a day do you put into it?
When I get a good routine going, depending on my regular life schedule, I can average 4 to 6 hours a day. But then there'll be a week where I won't be able to touch it because of family and kids and other stuff going on. So.
What kind of, are you going to go into teaching or performing?
Yeah, both. I have about 13 private guitar students, and I teach band and orchestra and piano and guitar with the Anchorage School of Music. And I perform around town classical guitar, and I also play in a band called Top Secret. And we just played in Girdwood this weekend, and it's a dance, 70s funk band. So just a little bit of everything. That's what I do. I play music and I teach music.
Does Alaska offer you a good future in that field?
It depends on who you talk to. I think it does because I love living here. There's still a lot of opportunity here because the population isn't really big yet. I doubt if I could ever make it on MTV or anything by staying in Alaska, but that's not my goals anyway. So, yeah, I think that there's opportunity here. From Juneau. I'm graduating this year, and I'm going to apply to grad schools. One of them's in Juneau, so if I get into the one in Juneau, I'll be going back there.
Okay, well, thank you, John. I very much enjoyed your performance.
For more information on many of the stories in this week's show, check out our website, akradio.org. You can also listen to our archives and comments and find out how you can be part of the show, akradio.org. Coming up after the break, Blowing Glass Balls and a preview of the new Nothing Less CD, Beyond Therapy.
children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Each week, the geniuses behind AK bring you a sound quiz, a chance to test your hearing and guess at a mystery sound. You're not going to get this one, so we'll just play it real quick and move on to the answer. Here goes. Stumped? That was the sound of a hot iron rod being dipped into a bucket of water. AK's Jessica Cochran discovered it's just one of the many sounds at the Alaska Glass Studio and Gallery each weekend in November and December.
The noise hits as soon as you walk into Cynthia England's Alaska Glass Studio. Most of the space is cordoned off. Behind the rope, there are numerous kilns and ovens, a metal-top table, a workbench, and other mysterious pieces of equipment needed to shepherd 80 people a day through the process of blowing their own glass Christmas balls. England has presented the workshops for years, and they are well attended. On the other side of the rope, there's a set of bleachers filled with people waiting their turn, and a table where each participant picks her colors. That's where I met Jennifer, Stacy, and Linda, 3 nurses from Nome in town for some Christmas shopping, an afternoon at the spa, and a chance to blow some glass balls.
I guess now the process we're in now is choosing the color that we want for our ornaments.
It's actually a difficult decision.
There's a lot to choose from.
Bowls full of glass pieces, colored glass pieces, and they have some mixtures and some just basic colors, and there's just a variety of
and then there's a sample.
Wonderful colors.
There's also a sample next to each box to show you what it actually looks like when it's been kilned and blown.
Do you choose one color then, or can you choose a bunch of colors? Or?
Choose a bunch of colors. You can choose one color, or there are some of the colors that are mixed with different colors. But there's one that's everything, that's a mixture of everything.
We're going to lecture about what's going on. That's our furnace he's going into right now. It holds about 350 pounds of glass at 2,100 degrees. It's about the temperature of lava when it's erupted out of a volcano. She mixes up her own glass here out of the raw materials. The furnace is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The annealing oven, the pipe warmer over in the corner, and the glory hole are turned on in the morning and off at night.
Bruce Gamble is one of 3 assistants behind the rope. He volunteers at the studio in exchange for blowing time. He got hooked on glass blowing 5 years ago when the studio offered classes.
I took the classes, then she decided not to offer them anymore. It was too much trouble, too much of a drain on their regular production work. So I started hanging out, volunteering to earn blowing time, because there's only, I think, 3 hot shops in the state of Alaska that I know of. One in Homer, one here, this one here, and one in Fairbanks. And obviously this is not a home kind of hobby, so I got to get back over there.
Okay. Christmas Cowell is another glass artist. She works on a smaller scale with a torch instead of a furnace. She's a fan of Cynthia England's work and comes every year to support the studio, bringing a different group of friends each time. For her, the event has become a tradition.
It's kind of fun. I gave my daughter the first one I'd ever done, which was in Corning, New York, years ago. And then when I started coming and doing them with Cynthia, I started giving her one every year for Christmas. So now it's become somewhat of a tradition. She's 25. She'll be 26 in January. So one of these days she'll have a good collection of these glass ornaments. And it's kind of a nice memory, you know.
If everything goes well, each ornament takes only a few minutes to complete. England uses a long pipe to pull hot glass out of the main furnace. The colored glass bits picked by the customer are spread out on the marber, a special table that the molten glass won't stick to. Then the guest artist and England take turns reheating the glass in a smaller furnace called the glory hole, adding more color and using a mold to stamp ridges onto the piece. Then it's time to blow. Cynthia sits on a bench, the pipe supported above her, and rolls it back and forth, shaping the piece as each guest blows through a long tube.
Blow! Blow! Blow harder! Blow! Come on, Christmas! Stop! Blow! Blow! Okay, up!
Okay, go over to that X over there with Scott.
The finished ball is cut off of its rod and placed in a stand. There, another blob of molten glass is added and formed into a loop. The pipe is placed in a bucket of water. That's where the sound comes in. And the ornament heads into an oven that looks a little bit like a large white casket. There, the temperature is brought down gradually overnight to remove thermal stresses and keep the ornament from shattering. The pipe is heavy. It's hot next to the furnaces, and England shouts instructions at a rapid rate. But Stacy and Linda, two of the nurses from Nome, say it was well worth it.
It was exciting to watch the colors come out in the ball, because it was so hard to tell from just the little pieces of glass what it was going to look like.
And then in the middle there, it doesn't look anything like the colors.
No, not at all. And then when you start blowing, it's like, it didn't look like it was going to come out round. Like it was going to have a big lump on the side, it was going to collapse on itself or something. But it didn't.
But she's just constantly...
Yeah, and she tells you just when to blow and when not to blow. And how much pressure to use.
You said it was incredible. What was?
Oh, it was just it was so quick, and now I made a piece of art that I'll cherish forever. So until it breaks, at least.
And it's a good thing it's fast. Stacy and Linda have a spa appointment to get to, and Cynthia England has a bleacher full of people still waiting their turn. I'm Jessica Cochran.
When we started planning this show, we asked Alaskans around the state to share their stories of flight. One morning, this little gem showed up in our voicemail.
To listen, press 0.
Yes, this is Sylvia Holly Gutierrez calling from Hooper Bay, Alaska, and I'm calling in reference to a flight that I took from Hooper Bay to Bethel. The plane got stuck in the mud, and we all had to get out and push it out over there in KUAC. Yeah, thought you might be interested in that little airplane ride story. Then the airplane started rattling real loud once we got back into the air, and I put my hand over the air vent, and it stopped. We were glad to get there safely.
Today's pilots use radar, GPS, and other tools to make flying safer. Some even have access to Capstone, the new Federal Aviation Administration's program that provides pilots with in-flight weather information and electronic maps that track position relative to the terrain and other aircraft. Improved technology and a heavy emphasis on safety over the last 20 years have driven accident rates down. In an analysis released last month, the FAA reported there were 106 accidents between January and October this year, the lowest number in more than a decade. FAA programs reward companies that meet stricter safety standards than the government requires and train passengers to be smart, informed air travelers. Still, there are plenty of Alaskans who have spent some nervous minutes on airplanes. Denali Park resident Tom Walker recalls a flight that relied on much earlier radar technology, and he was the only uninformed passenger.
As we flew northwest from Fairbanks, the clouds thickened. Before long, we were flying between two layers of clouds, the lower one smothering the land below. The scheduled flight to Shungnak and Ambler carried 8 people, the pilot, 6 Inupiaq villagers, and me. Some of the passengers dozed. Others stared out the window at the gray clouds closing in. After an hour's flight into the thickening gloom, the pilot began to circle a hole in the clouds. Below us I could see a small drainage winding through forest. The pilot unfolded a chart and appeared to make comparisons with what he was seeing. He looked uncertain and confused. After executing a few more turns, we resumed level flight and continued on. The 2 passengers sitting in front of me exchanged looks, then shrugs. More openings began to appear in the cloud layer below, and we glimpsed the river, slopes, tundra, and forest. The pilot craned his head left and right to study the scene. I was certain now that he was lost, and he had no more idea of where we were than I did. All of the passengers were awake and looking down. None seemed alarmed. Next, a long straight stretch of river appeared through the clouds. The pilot again consulted his map as we made another slow, wide circle. Again, the 2 men ahead of me looked at one another. After one circle, we resumed level flight. A few minutes later, another stretch of river and forest came into view. It looked no different to me than anything else we'd seen. Just before the view was lost beneath the low-lying clouds, all of the passengers' heads turned in unison as if they'd spotted something below. The pilot noticed the movement and looked back at the passengers. He did a slight double take before executing a slow descending right-hand turn. My fellow passengers seemed nonplussed by all of this, but I was sweating. As we descended through the hole in the clouds, a large expanse of river and forest came into view. We were heading up a wide river valley, and I relaxed now that I could see that there were no mountains hidden in the mist. Most of the passengers were now peering backward. Again the pilot seemed to take notice, and we made a slow turn to fly downriver. In a short time there was Juneau dead ahead. Our approach and landing was uneventful, and the usual fleet of four-wheelers met us when we stopped at the edge of the airstrip. People came forward to greet passengers and help unload freight for the store and post office. I took the opportunity to stretch my legs and walk around a bit. I was going on from here to Ambler downriver, but had no desire to get back in the plane. 20 minutes after landing, we were ready to go again, and I responded to the pilot's beckon. "I bet you thought we were lost, right?" he said. I shook my head, yes. "Nope," he said, "but thank God for Eskimo radar." I'm Tom Walker from Denali Park.
Alaska isn't necessarily famous for its music scene, but one South Central-based band may soon be breaking into the biz nationally. Nothing Less consists of 3 college-age guys who play hard and have a shot at going big. They recently scored a recording deal with Alcatraz Records out of San Francisco and are about to drop their first full-length album.
Henry Hartman, Tim Waters, and Tommy Dowell are 3 talented guys and nothing less. Together they blend vocals, drums, bass, and guitar in the music that's not defined by any one music genre. Drummer Henry Hartman explains.
If I had to give a name to it, I would describe our music as North Coast punk. It's a healthy blend of pop, ska, and punk.
Nothing Less's first full-length album, titled Beyond Therapy, features 12 original songs. While the songs on Beyond Therapy vary in tempo and mood, all are tight, concise little music packages. The beat determines the feel of the song. Some hinge on the lingering upbeat of ska rhythm, while others are built around a fast, penetrating punk rock pulse. The song Record Store tells the story of guitarist Tim Waters and his girlfriend, whom he met, well, at a record store. Nothing Less chose to feature Record Store in a music video, filmed at various Anchorage locations during the summer.
Oh, dude, it's like 7 days of mayhem. It was crazy.
Hartman says it took about 200 hours of filming and even more time post-producing to make the video.
Our video has what all classic videos have. It's a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's characters, there's a plot. It's like a movie overscored by Nothing Less. It's like a punk rock opera.
Tim Waters says Nothing Less hopes the video goes a long way, like all the way to MTV.
A lot of bands get their breakthrough from MTV, and it's truly the only form of media that can make a band worldwide successful.
Their music video is not the only thing that Nothing Less has high hopes for. They say they'd like to sign on with a larger label someday and tour nationally. That's after 2 of them finish degrees at UAA in the spring. Then the band says a move to California might be in order to gain more national exposure. But even if their music does take them away from Alaska, Nothing Less says they won't forget their roots. Bassist Tommy Dowell.
We love our fans. They're why we do it, really. We do it for the fans. We love the fans and how they make us feel.
Although Nothing Less is still working on getting to the top nationally, by Alaska standards, they rock. The Beyond Therapy CD release party starts at 7 p.m. December 20th at UAA. They'll also debut their Record Store video and play an all-ages show. For AK, I'm Melissa Smith.
Since the advent of aviation in Alaska, the skies have been filled every day with the buzz of planes large and small. Some might call the constant thrum of engines noise, but for lifelong Alaskan David Crewdson, they mean home, something he realized when the sounds were conspicuously absent a couple of years ago.
I've lived in Alaska my whole life. Airplanes have been a constant presence. In the 50s in Juneau, it was Grumman amphibians and PBYs coming and going on Gastineau Channel, and DC-4s and 6s. super constellations, and stratocruisers at the airport. We had a special recess at Harborview Elementary to see the first commercial jet flight to Alaska, from Seattle to Anchorage. The flight was diverted, passing over Juneau at about 20,000 feet. The whole school stood on the playground and watched the contrail that heralded the new age pass from horizon to horizon. In the 60s, in Anchorage, it was Boeing 707s, the Air Force, and endless float planes all summer long. We lived on Anchorage International's flight path. The landing lights lit up our living room, and the engines drowned out the TV. We went to an air show at Elmendorf and watched, I believe it was an Australian Air Force Canberra jet, do a low-altitude flyby. East of the runway, it caught a wingtip in the trees, spun in and exploded, killing all aboard. In the 70s, I took flight. A friend and I bought a PA-16 for $4,200 and started taking lessons. It was wonderful. We had so much fun. He went on to a career in flying and will retire soon with over 20,000 hours. My life went in other directions, but my lifelong love affair with airplanes and flight goes on as strong as ever. I have so many memories, from the wonderful to the tragic. However, my most indelible memory of aviation in Alaska is this. One morning my wife got me out of bed early to see something on TV. Seconds later I watched the first tower of the World Trade Center implode. Watching it sucked the breath out of my body. For the next 3 days, the skies above Anchorage were empty and silent. And for 3 days, I couldn't breathe. That empty silence was eerie and frightening. I didn't catch my breath until the planes returned to the sky. A lifetime of cherished memories of aviation in Alaska, and the one that will never leave me is the 3 days when there were no airplanes at all. I'm David Crewdson.
And that's all for this week's edition of AK. We had help from a handful of commentators, Susie Sillock, Tom Walker, and David Crewdson. Writer Linda Billington also read for us. AK's Ellen Lockyer and KUAC's Dan Bross gathered lots of sound. Melissa Smith of the Alaska Teen Media Institute and Fairbanks freelancer Rachel Kvapil reported this week.
I know I said I love you. I know you know it's true. I got to put the phone down and do what we gotta do. One standing in the highway, two more at the door. We got to get inside there before they kill some more. Time's running out. Let's roll.
We heard music by John Unzicker, Nothing Less, Nervous Rex, Jimmy Simpson, and the Anchorage Christmas Symphony. Our theme music is by Bamua. AK is produced by Jessica Cochran. John Nelson is our production director. Duncan Moon, our executive producer and editor. And thanks to Michelle Wozniak for letting me sit in. She'll be back next week. I'm Elizabeth Arnold, and who says you can't come home again?
AK is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, whose mission is to provide programs and services which inform, enlighten, and enrich the public. By the Alaska Humanities Forum, using the humanities to enrich the civic, intellectual, and cultural life of all Alaskans. By the Alaska Railroad Corporation, weekend flag stop service is now available between Anchorage and Fairbanks. Information is available for off-season packages and seasonal trains at alaskarailroad.com. Web design and support for AK is provided by Northern Exposure Consulting on the web at nexconsulting.com and at 907-277-7393.
This is APRN, the Alaska Public Radio Network.